Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Before we talk about the impacts of Isaias, we need to get the setup here. So this first map goes back to the month of May, and it's looking at the total precipitation ranks by climate district. Now, the closer the number is to 1 inside of each climate district, the closer it was to being the wettest such May time period on record. 128 would be the driest. So May was clearly extremely wet across the Carolinas. As we transitioned into June, things got a little bit drier, but it was still wetter than average overall across the state. But look at what happened once we got into the month of July. Parts of the eastern half of the state, specifically the northeastern part of North Carolina here, having one of its driest years on record. Well, driest months, driest July months on record. And so when we take a look at those statistics, that tells us this. The crops that went in the eastern half of the state here went in under very wet conditions, matured early with wet conditions, and then transitioned hot and dry as we got into the month of July. And I do mean hot. This is looking at July average temperature ranks by climate districts. You can again see that if you kind of average this all together, this is going to be a top 20 hottest July on record. Again, we got 128 years in this data set. Now, why I bring that up is because we've learned that if you can stress a crop a little bit early in its development, force the crop to develop a better root system, then it has better stand quality later on in its life. If you give it a lot of water early, it develops shallow root systems because it doesn't have to go searching for the water, and it can therefore be more susceptible to later season problems like a hot July, followed then by what is going to be a very windy and very wet next 3-day time period. The map you're looking at here is the all hazards weather map, and we can see that along the I-95 corridor stretching, clear from South Carolina all the way up to Maine, we have got a lot of advisories out. This includes hurricane warnings, hurricane watches, tropical storm warnings, and a lot of advisories, watches, and warnings about floods. And that's because we did have the development of what was Hurricane Isaias. And that's a tricky name. Isaias is how we pronounce it. And it came across parts of the island of Hispaniola, then across part of Cuba. Then as it got over the Bahamas, it weakened and disorganized and never really hit Florida. But as you can see in this animation, where our radars are capturing the very edge of Isaias here, in the overnight hours, it was starting to, once again, form an eye that we could see here. Now, meanwhile, while this was occurring, we did have throughout the day on Sunday and getting into the early morning hours this morning quite a bit of shower and thunderstorm activity across North Carolina before the moisture from Isaias gets there. But I was watching carefully the infrared satellite temperatures early this morning, and when I see here at the very end of this animation a very large convective plume, we call these hot towers here right there, that tells me this system was strengthening. Now, the latest update from the National Hurricane Center, I was waiting until 8 a.m. Eastern to get this update, is that they are anticipating this getting back up to hurricane strength probably within the next 6 hours. Right now, the tropical storm is sitting at 70 miles an hour with a maximum sustained wind. To become a hurricane, it needs to be 74. And while they are anticipating that, they have issued along the coast there in red, as you can see along the North and South Carolina coast, that is where we currently have our hurricane warnings in place with hurricane watches all around. Now, the moment this does make landfall, which will more than likely be late tonight or early tomorrow morning, right there on the border of North and South Carolina, it will be downgraded to a tropical storm, but it's still going to produce very strong winds and quite a bit of heavy precipitation. The European model, you can see, takes it right there, cutting into the United States, right on the North and South Carolina border, and then running straight through parts of eastern North Carolina before getting into the mid-Atlantic. The GFS says the same thing. It's a little bit different map here, though, because you can see the GFS projects where this is going to eventually go about 10 days from now out into the North Atlantic. But you can see right in through here almost the exact same projected path as the European now. I want to tell you something. The GFS model picked up on the eastward shift in this system far earlier than the European. In my opinion, the GFS did a much better job. So if we think about what could either limit or strengthen this system in its remaining hours before it hits the Carolina coast, I'm going to talk about two things: relative humidity and wind shear. Now, the first map we're looking at here is relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. So the tropical system is sitting here, and it is forecast to go through this track. Now, what would possibly limit the development of any tropical system is if in its path there was a lot drier air. We see that the drier tongue of air is pretty far over here to the east. If this were being wrapped into the northern side of Isaias, then we would talk about it being weakened substantially, but we don't see that. Ahead of Isaias is relatively high humidity air, and that's critical for the maintenance of this system's strength. The other thing is wind shear. Now, what is wind shear? It's a change of wind speed and direction with height. The higher the wind shear value, the weaker the hurricane will be. The reason why? Wind shear spreads out the vortex, and it also spreads out the heating, which prevents the hurricane from becoming stronger and stronger. Now, the map you're looking at is showing you wind shear. So remember, hurricanes hate wind shear. They love to sit and spin violently in low wind shear environments. So Isaias is here now, and it's forecast to go on a track just like this. The highest wind shear values are back here, as you can see. And those values are coming from a deeper trough that moved through the Midwest. Ahead of Isaias is relatively higher wind shear, which is going to prevent this, despite the warm ocean temperatures and the abundant amount of moisture, going to prevent Isaias from getting much stronger than a weak Category 1 strength system. But as a result of that northward path through very moist air, you can see this is the European model's prediction for total accumulated precipitation through the next 4 days. We see that spreading through parts of coastal South Carolina, then eastern North Carolina, a range of 3+ inches is in there, in some locations picking up as much as 6 inches of rain, maybe locally even more. As we look at the GFS model, it's very similar in its track and total precipitation amounts as it moves through. So why I started off this video showing you those ranks maps was so that you saw how hot and dry July was, and now we're bringing in all this very, very heavy rainfall. So this is not the way that we want to end this would-be drought that was developing in parts of North Carolina. Now, what about winds? Well, this just came out as I was getting ready to release this video. This is the latest, the 6Z run from the GFS, and it did increase wind speeds. We can see throughout much of North Carolina, we're going to be seeing 30 to 70 mile an hour wind gusts over the next couple of days. Now, Isaias is going to move very quickly throughout the day on Tuesday through North Carolina, but as it does so, some pretty strong winds. The European model is much more aggressive with that focused band of stronger winds, suggesting that they may be gusting up to 80+ miles an hour in some places. And as you saw earlier, this was the region in North Carolina that suffered from the hottest and driest conditions during the month of July, which made a crop that wasn't stressed early because of so much water more vulnerable to stress now. So we're going to watch it very, very carefully to see how strong these winds are as they come through. Just to show you some high resolution modeling here, we see from the NAM, generally across the state, a 35 to 70 mile an hour wind gust being the maximum once you get basically from Raleigh to the east. That seems to be the numbers here. And finally, from the National Digital Forecast Database, so in other words, this is what the National Weather Service curates, we see a similar pattern to what the GFS was playing out, which means if you get to the east of that line, we're talking about 30 to 70 mile an hour winds. So we need to be prepared for those strong winds. We need to be prepared for heavy rains, 3 to 6+ inches out of this, but it will be moving very quickly through. Now, before we got there, this is what rainfall looked like through early this morning. We did have some scattered storms over the weekend, hit or miss, including some strong to severe storms that went racing through here back on the 31st, out of parts of Tennessee and over into the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. But still, a lot of scattered precipitation about over the last 3 days. And you can see when I show you the last couple of weeks, let's just zoom in here on North Carolina, and you notice there are a lot of pockets where we get into these shades of red. That's 40 to 80% of normal rainfall over the last couple of weeks. So we're going to be bringing in very heavy rainfall to some very dry locations. Meanwhile, for you corn and soybean growers, I just want you to realize there's a very large section of very productive ground in parts of Iowa, southern Minnesota, northern Illinois, parts of Wisconsin, and southeastern South Dakota that have been very, very dry as of late. And we're talking about some pretty significant yield losses, especially in parts of Iowa that went most of the month of July without much precipitation and quite a bit of warm weather. So putting this all together, this map is of course going to be skewed by how much precipitation we're anticipating from Isaias, but you can see that there will be a pocket in there that is capable of getting 6 inches of rainfall, this coming from the National Weather Service right in through this corridor. Kind of giving you an update on where things are going after this, take a look at how this pattern is going to evolve. We're going to watch 3 key areas: Alaska, the deep trough that's right here in the Midwest, and Scandinavia. As I play this forward, I'm going to pause it right here, because what we see is that as we go through the next few days, the deeper trough that's been in the Midwest is going to start to lift. And as it lifts out, we see that by the time we get into this weekend, the general flow pattern is including a pretty broad ridge right in through the midsection of the country. Now, at this particular time, there's a deep trough over Alaska and a large ridge over Scandinavia. Now, why I'm concerned about this is a high over low. See it? A high ridge over low pressure to the south, and that tends to be a blocking pattern. If that sticks around for at least 10 days, then we can officially call it a block. Well, what I notice is it stays there for a while, and during that time period, troughs keep digging in to the west. And the ridge backs up here over to the Great Plains and then eventually into parts of the Four Corners states. Now, why this is important is the flow pattern, watch with the cursor here, goes ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, trough over the west, ridge over the Four Corners, and then we end up getting some northwest flow coming out of the Midwest over toward the Carolinas. What you do not see here over the eastern part of the United States is a large ridge that could block up the flow, send us into major drought with extreme heat. So as we play this out through the next 10 days, the heat's going to stay to the west of us for the most part. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Now, over the next 2 days, we do have the risk for those severe storms. We have, because of the synoptic scale rotation, that's the large scale rotation of a tropical system, chances in the northern quadrant and in the northeastern quadrant for this system to be producing smaller scale circulations like tornadoes. And so what we're going to see here is that as this goes through, we do have the slight risk for severe storms today and again tomorrow. And then as we work our way toward the end of the week, we still have thunderstorm chances on Thursday and Friday. But at this point, I'm not seeing anything I'm overly concerned about for severe weather. And again, those bottom two maps are a thunderstorm environment forecast, and the top three are from the Storm Prediction Center. So let's watch it all take place in the European model. Okay, let's pause it here and watch this again. So we will see throughout the day today scattered showers across North and South Carolina. As we work our way from Monday afternoon into Monday evening, and now into about midnight on Monday, you can see that that's the point at which the European model brings the system right here into the coast. Now, the European model wants to make this a Category 1 strength hurricane at this point, but I want you to notice this. So this is midnight tonight. This is going to 6 a.m. tomorrow. So it has already gone from here almost to the northern border with Virginia. And then by the time we get into the afternoon, this system is clear up here in Delaware. So it's going to move very quickly from late tonight through tomorrow afternoon straight through the state of North Carolina. This is what's going to prevent it from giving us some major flooding problems because it's going to move relatively quickly. Let's watch it again. There it is. So by the time we get into the overnight hours on Tuesday into Wednesday morning, that system is already clear up here in Maine, Tropical Storm Isaias or potentially Hurricane Isaias. And behind it, we've got a little bit cooler weather coming in. But notice, Wednesday afternoon and evening, scattered storms once again across the area. As we go from there into Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening, we see it again. Scattered showers and thunderstorms here along the coast. So we're not getting away from our wetter pattern even after Isaias goes through. Then as we work our way into Friday night, see the storms again, Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening. So the nature of the scattered storms we've seen across the state comes back to us after Isaias goes blasting through. And I'll just take this all the way out to next Monday morning. So here's Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon and evening. Again, scattered storms on the heat of the day. And now let's go into Monday morning, afternoon, and evening. And we see the same thing. So this is that kind of annoying, 30 to 50% chance of rain that we get. It's very much hit or miss. No organized frontal boundaries coming through the area. From there, let's go out to day 10 one more time. And what we see in both the GFS is a ridge here, the European a ridge there, and the flow pattern comes over the top of it like this. And as a result, both the GFS, which brings wetter than average conditions in through here, and the European have us on a wetter than average look as we go into week 2, which gets us from the 10th through the 17th of August. Now, gosh, we're already talking about the middle of August here. From there, let's talk temperatures before we do some longer range and some international weather. So today, under cloud cover, we're going to have struggling to get highs out of the low 80s, low to mid 80s. As we play this into tomorrow, it's another similar situation. But remember how quickly the system moves. So we're going to go back up to mid-80s by the afternoon on Tuesday. As we get into Wednesday, our temperatures go back over to normal. And then as we go into Thursday and Friday and Saturday, we see much of the same, okay? Remember, it was after this time period, after the weekend, that we started to see the heat building back in the west. But overall, we have that northwest flow coming across North Carolina. So what do we end up getting? In the 6 to 10 day time period, the heat is all here. And generally, we're going to be seeing near average temperatures across the southeast, including North Carolina. What about days 11 through 15? I see a very similar pattern, right? See, the heat's going to be on that ridge that's back here in the western United States, and it extends into the Canadian prairies and through the Midwest, where we tend to see in this area near average temperatures. Now, there are a few things that are moving. We're going to talk about them again in just a few seconds. The Southern Oscillation Index peaked, and it makes us think that we're going to get into La Nina, but we're just not there yet. Bigger news is that the MJO, after the next 2 weeks, is going to try to go back to Africa. Why that's important is that would mean the middle and end of August will go right back over to active tropical cyclone season. And finally, the North Pacific keeps maintaining its momentum, which means we don't slow down the North Pacific, which is why our weather systems seem to be unblocked while they're preferring blocking over Scandinavia, which is upstream from us. So putting that into some maps here, this is going to be looking at the latest European outlook from Friday, from the latest long-range outlook from the European from Friday. So over the time period of the 14th to the 21st, we see near average to slightly above average temperatures. In fact, that extends to the end of August as well. And the models just want to keep things stormy, normal stormy pattern for us. Is this same pattern echoed in the US version of this model, which is called the CFSV2? Well, it is, but there's been some very significant changes in terms of temperatures just to your west. And you can see now that the CFSV2 model is favoring near average temperatures through middle August, but warming things up at the end of the month. But wants to just keep things stormy, just like the European does. So it looks as though we're going to be going over toward a warmer and stormy finish to the month. Also notice this too. Can you see how the greens are in here in the CFS model? It's suggesting an active tropical cyclone season as we progress through the second half of the month of August. From there, quick international update, okay? First, over the next 10 days or so, 10 to 15 days, warming and a lot of drying happening in Ukraine. In fact, much of Europe is seeing a warmer and drier pattern with the exception of near the Alps and south, okay? We already have drought issues in parts of France and Germany stretching through here, and we have the issues of getting hotter and drier in Ukraine as we press forward. Over in China, I want to show you something here. We have got a tropical system that's going to be going right here over Shanghai. Now, why that's critical is where we've seen all of the flooding in through this area, which is right now kind of culminating here on the Three Gorges Dam. Well, Shanghai, if that tropical cyclone comes right in through here, Shanghai is like the delta. It's where the edge of this river comes out. And we see that over the next 10 days, very wet conditions in through here. See it? And that is the watershed for the Yangtze River, which is the river on which the Three Gorges Dam is on. So we expect these flooding issues you keep seeing and hearing about in the news to continue. The northern China Plain is also forecast to be quite wet as we move forward as well in this forecast. From there, I want to talk lastly about ocean temperatures. So the La Nina we've been watching so carefully in through here has really yet to fully materialize. We keep getting these nice trade winds that show up, but they don't yet get us fully over to the La Nina status. But I want you to look very carefully, right in here. This is Nino region 1-2. Now, why I want you to look at that area is because of the map I flashed here. You see, in that area, if we correlate temperatures in there to rainfall rate, the warmer it gets in that area, the heavier the rainfall is in here. So the cooler it gets in that area, the less the rainfall is. And as you just saw, it's cool in there. And so right now we're concerned that in this area, that's some of Brazil's major growing area, that we're going to go into September and October drier than normal. It's already dry there already. This is the root zone soil moisture measurements made by GRACE. It's a satellite showing how very dry things are during this winter in Brazil's main growing areas. And I've been looking at the fires, and this particular map puts a red dot everywhere that we're observing fires from space. We can see that parts of central Brazil, getting down, even down into Argentina, right now have a lot of very widespread fire action happening on pasture land and also brushland. So that is right in through the midsection of this particular image. And one last thing to show you, there are some controlled fires that are happening in northern Brazil as you get into the Amazon rainforest. And that's some of the fires that you can see here captured by Sentinel, which is a satellite out of Europe. I want to watch this situation carefully because, let's go back a couple maps, because if this soil moisture deficit stays in place as we get into September and October, they will wait until they get the first signs of the monsoonal rains returning before planting those soybeans. And if there's any sort of delay in that, that delays the planting of soybeans, therefore the harvesting of them, and as a result, the second crop, which is corn and cotton and a few other things. So we just have an interesting situation that is coming out of South America, and I want to keep you aware of it, okay? Hey, that was a lot to take in today. Thank you so much. For those of you that are going to be kind of riding out the hurricane here, please be very, very careful. And if you get any pictures or images before the system gets there, you can send them to me, eric.snodgrass@nutrien.com. I would love to see them, but please be safe in the coming days here. Okay? Thank you.